Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Leadership and Communication Gets You to the Top. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Career Programs team in the BU Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by BU Alumni Relations as part of our Alumni Career Weeks 2019 series and is offered to our 335,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing our alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. I know that we have alumni joining us today from some very faraway places like China, Spain, France, Greece, Morocco, Peoria, Arizona, Hayward, California, Silverthorne, Colorado, Farmington, Connecticut, Tampa, Florida, Boone, Iowa, Fort Lee, New Jersey, Portland, Oregon, Lincoln, Rhode Island, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Dorchester, Hanover, Hubbardston, Lexington, Malden, Quincy, Revere, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really value your participation in this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, I'll ask that you contact Zoom support directly. If you want to jot down the number, you can reach Zoom support at 1-888-799-9666. That's 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni Association website, which you can find at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation. What you'll do is hover over your screen, look for the Zoom menu, and you'll click on Q&A. And just go ahead and type in your question whenever it comes up, and we'll have plenty of time at the end of Leena's presentation to get to those. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU Questrom School of Business alumna Leena Roy. Leena is currently an ICF certified professional coach and a CFA charter holder with over 15 years on Wall Street. Rising up the ranks to management level status early in her career, Leena's made it her mission as a life and leadership coach to empower and elevate every professional to achieve their highest potential. Personal mantra has always been choice over chance. Leena runs a successful coaching program showing professionals how to take charge of their development, balance work and life transitions, and create powerful results. In private sessions and small groups, Leena opens up the doors of choice, intention, and purpose. Her programs are designed for motivated individuals of any background ready to create their breakthroughs. I invite you to check out her website at www.leenaroy.net for more information. Leena, thanks so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and close out my slide deck, and if you want to go ahead and open yours, the floor will be all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you, and your slide deck looks good on my end. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Leena. And thank you, Jeff, for that lovely introduction and having me here today as part of the career series at BU. And thank you, everybody listening in, for joining me on a busy Wednesday afternoon or evening or night for some of you to talk about leadership and communication. Personally, I'm truly excited to be doing this event for Boston University. I had an incredibly rich experience at the Questrom School of Management, and after I graduated in 2001, I started my career in New York at the New York Stock Exchange. A little bit about me there. Transitioning from student to professional life was not as smooth looking back. I had trouble finding my voice and speaking up, and I didn't have a great manager, or that's how I felt at the time, as the department I was started in was going through a lot of changes and everything felt a little uncertain. Now, in retrospect, after years of work and coaching, I can appreciate that uncertainty and difficult experiences like that are really what you need to grow, and to overcome it, you need strong communication. Showing leadership and communication means to have control and direction over expressing yourself and declaring what it is you want. It's what all true leaders have in common, the power to speak up. Before we keep going, Jeff, if you don't mind bringing up the first poll, I would love to see how many people on the chat have either experienced any kind of communication coaching or training. So you could pick yes, you got a lot from it, or you would love to one day, or it's not really your thing, which is totally fine.
So Leena, looks, we've got almost 50% of people who voted. So again, folks, if you would be so kind as to go ahead and read through the selections and pick the one that best fits where you are. Give it just another second as the votes are still rolling in.
Sure.
And Leena, you'll be able to see the results in just a second here after we give people one more final chance.
Excited to see how it shows up.
Well, while we're waiting, what do you think? Where do you think the majority of folks will be on this?
I think in today that like people will either have had training or they would love to. I think there's such a focus now on coaching out in the workplace.
All right,
So definitely some kind of training.
Go ahead and share those results. Do you see them on your screen now?
Yeah, I do. So 40%, which is a great percentage to have had some kind of training, and 50%, 55 would love to. So it's perfect. And now you guys can say you've had some after today. So I'm going to just go into the next slide. So before we get started, I just wanted to share my contact information in case we don't get to everybody's questions and comments today. I just wanted to make sure you had some way to reach out to me after the webinar was over. And also be sure to save my email because at the end of our time together, I will be sharing a special gift with each of you, but you're going to need my email to access that. So let me start by telling you something that happened to me early in my career. 15 years ago, I went in to tell my boss, let's call him Peter, that I was unhappy about a work situation. And he listened to me for a little bit. He wasn't responsive. It didn't seem like he was in a great mood. And then he told me to leave the office. He called the meeting to a short end. And I was confused and upset and also a little angry. And it took some time to unpack what happened and how I got to that point. And with my mentors and coaches subsequently, it led me to some realizations that I want to share with you all today. And it made me understand that good communication starts with really working on yourself. And so that's our goals for today. People talk a lot about communicating up, down, across, like the 3 ways of communication. But I would say there's always 4, because honestly, it starts with I, the self. And that's our agenda. Our goal for today's session is to look at communication in all 4 of these directions. Because in the workplace and similarly in life, it really never is just one level. You truly need to access the full 360 degrees to succeed. Just to be clear that when I say direction, it makes sense. I wanted to have this little org chart because it's important to understand where you fit on your own org chart. Of course, this will be different from people to people, but the basic framework for today's discussion is where you have coworkers that are peers, you have associates reporting up to you, and of course, a manager. Some of you are your own boss, and you'll just see how the situation fits. Not all of these will apply, but I think the learnings can be used almost in any work relationship. So let's go back to managing in and to my story. So what had I done wrong? I was, to be honest, as I was saying, fairly confused when I walked out of Peter's office. I'd been there a couple of years and had never experienced him like that. I stayed out of trouble, I stuck to myself, I got my work done, and if I had an issue, I went to my boss. Otherwise, I didn't really bother him or talk to him. Wasn't I doing everything right? As I said, it took me some time and some coaching to finally realize that I was part of the problem. I had made my career all about me. I had spent my time being fairly self-absorbed and really focused on the work that I had to do and not about what was happening around me. What I found out later was that part of my department was restructuring, and my manager, Peter, was about to be taken off this major project that he was struggling. And when I walked into that office that day with my issue, I had simply made the situation a little bit worse. And I had gone in to complain instead of trying to fix the situation. So if I'd really paid more attention or talked to my manager or really expanded my network, I might have figured this out myself a lot earlier on. The issue is that focusing on yourself, not picking up on cues, not being proactive about a difficult situation, these are all indicators of poor emotional intelligence, which we all know now makes a big difference. And ultimately, this leads to a poorer communication. And this is why self-management is really the first step for good communication. Being thrown out of the office in retrospect might have been one of the best things that happened to me because it made me stop and think about how I was being experienced and how I was reacting in the world. And when I came across this quote, I thought it was perfect. The art of communication is the language of leadership. I have found this to be so true. Without mastering self-expression, you cannot move into true leadership. So When we talk about emotional intelligence, we want to focus on communication EQ in this case. So this quiz is to do a quick assessment so we can all see where we stand today, right now. And the goal is really for you to think about where you can improve as we go through today's session. So you don't have to share your results and you can be fairly honest. When it's important to be honest, you really know where you're at, so then you can see where you can go from there. So the first question, I often think about the bigger picture and the other parties involved. Meaning when you're trying to find a solution, you're looking to make the situation work for everybody, not just how you would get out, what you would get out of it. So if that's you always, you would give yourself a 5. If that's never you, it's a 1. And I'm sure your score is somewhere in between. So I'll give you a second to score yourself. I don't know if you can grab a piece of paper or it's just 4 questions. You can keep track of it. The second question, I state my feelings clearly and directly with a respectful and caring attitude. So this means you're not afraid to be honest, but you make sure not to offend your listeners either. It's like really providing feedback in a constructive way. If this is always you, again, give yourself a 5. And if you're somewhere in between, just rate yourself between 1 and 5. The third question is more about when things don't go your way. Do you end up being demanding, whiny, or more sarcastic? Do you leave the conversation? Whatever it is that you do when people disagree with you indicates your level of emotional intelligence as well. So the scoring is the reverse. If this never happens to you, then give yourself a 5. If it always happens, it's a 1. And I'm going to guess that again, we're somewhere in between. And then finally, following a conflict, I'm the first person to reach out and work towards a resolution. You know, when we allow ourselves to do that, we don't let our pride or ego block communication, which is one of the bigger blockers of communication. It allows us to say, you're sorry, or whatever it is you need to take initiative and try to resolve the conversation. And of course, we will always have conflict, and it's really what we do with the conflict after is what determines strong communication. So when you answer this question, really think about different situations and where you would score yourself. So I'll give you guys a minute to add up your totals.
I've come up with my score, Leena. I'm curious to hear kind of what the average is and how I stack up against where I should be.
Yeah, what's your score?
I'll be honest, I got a 13.
I was just going to say 13 to 15 or 12 to 15 is kind of the average. Because to be honest, like no one's going to be a 20 and not in every single situation. And the goal is really to move closer to that from like a 4 or 5. For example, back like with the situation with Peter, I would say that I was probably closer to an 8 or a 5 if I had done the test that day. But yeah, 13 to 12 to 15 is kind of average and just shows that people are kind of aware of where they're at, and there's always room for training, which is perfect. I think a lot of the foundation for strong communication really comes from putting all of these like learnings together. So you find a way to be authentic and have compassion while also having courage to speak up and be proactive and being open to being wrong. Like we're not all right all the time, and that's okay. And check in on people who are involved so you can really create a win-win. So let's explore these qualities a little more. How do you get your point across more effectively? In addition to having emotional intelligence, there's also practical things that you can do. And when you know that you're managing yourself, you see the results right away. You see that people are listening to you, they're following along, and they're taking action based on what you're saying. They're inspired to take actions. And some of the practical things that we'll talk about is really what I call the ABCs. And I'll refer to this as the ABC later on as well. And it stands for adapt, behavior, and communication. So adaptability, what does that mean? This ties in a lot with the communication EQ we were just discussing, but it's a little bit more. It's about connecting with people in a flexible way. It may mean that, as say you're talking to your coworker and you see that his eyes are glazing over, you really want to pay attention to that cue and modify what you're saying or how you're saying it, or try to understand what it is that somebody would be interested in, so you can form your message along that. And if you aren't sure, you can always ask for feedback, and that's the whole point. You can just say to somebody like, hey, this doesn't seem to be what you were asking me, so what would you like to talk about? And just keep the conversation open so you can enhance the communication. Under behavior, it's a little bit more physical as well. So it's your look and your style. Like, look at how confident she looks. But it's also a little bit more than that. It's your professionalism, it's poise, and it's also about body language. So are you sitting up? Are you slumped when you're having meetings? What are your hand gestures look like? Are they controlled? You know, so you're moving them a little bit. Are they stuck to your side? Are they like wild gestures? Some of this is a little bit cultural, but in the workspace, you can also pay attention. You want to maintain good eye contact, so you're not like intensely staring at someone, but you can also look away and, but not for too long, so it doesn't look like you're avoiding the topic. Controlling your breathing helps also. It helps control your emotions, and it helps kind of center you. So it's okay to slow down and to stop and take a breath while speaking. Which brings us really to communication, which is about the words and language that you use. So what kind of words are you using? Are your words more casual? Are they professional? What's your language? What's the use of your language? What about your voice? Is it too low, too high, pitchy? Are you speeding up too much? And finally, active listening, which is a slightly different part of communication. Active listening is almost as important as speaking, because it means that you're truly hearing the other person, and being able to do that ultimately improves your ability to respond in turn as well. So that's kind of the high level of ABCs: adaptability, behavior, and communication. So now we'll look at a slightly different thing that's also part of self-management, which is mastering difficult conversations. And as we all know, this happens more often than we like. So here's an example. Here's a story of a colleague, Marge, who was working on a project. She felt like she was stuck after being on it for a couple of years, and she wasn't growing. And I feel like a lot of us experience that. We get good at something at work, and then we're the ones doing it all the time. So she went into her manager's office to tell her that she was ready for a new challenge. And she started to say, I really learned a lot in this project. And before she could really get to it, her boss interrupted, or just said, that's great, and jumped into the things that she had on her plate that she wanted Marge to focus on. Marge was upset and later said, I never got to raise the issue. I think my boss deliberately avoided the discussion. And I would say that there's two ways of looking at this. So before I tell you more, I'd love to jump into our second poll, Jeff. And let's look at what should Marge have done? So option A, she did everything right. Her boss just sucked. Option B, she could have prepared her boss for what she wanted to discuss. Option C, when her boss changed the topic or went into something she was interested in, interjected and brought the conversation back on track. And option D, which is 2 and 3 together. So again, I'll give you guys a moment to pick an answer.
Yeah, I think this one, the answers are coming in a little bit more slowly as people evaluate the options here, Leena. Let's give it another.
For sure.
Too. And I've gotten one report from somebody who found that the poll wasn't working. Jennifer, I apologize for that. I have a suspicion. I'm not sure if the poll feature actually works if you're using a mobile device like a iPad or another kind of tablet. So I apologize to folks that are having an issue. Just over half of everybody on the webinar had, and Jennifer's using a laptop. Jennifer, I don't know what's going on, and I apologize for that. All right, well, we're at about 60% of you who've actually weighed in here, and I will go ahead and share those results so you can see them.
Yeah, perfect. I'm so glad to see this. 85% of you picked the right answer, option D and 3. And option 2 and 3 are also correct, but it's really like you could do both, and that's, I think, the point. Let me go off to the next slide. It might be, okay. So the truth is, we want to talk about something that is, just wanting to talk about something is not really the same as clearly expressing it. So going in there, having a strong idea that this is what you want to have happen in the conversation is important, because you do want to have that intention, but you also need to do some proactive things to make sure that it does happen. So here are some guidelines that Marge could have used and you can use if you have a difficult conversation coming up. So ahead of the meeting, you want to go out and get some advice. You can prep with a friend, a mentor, or a coach. There's a ton of blogs and sites out there nowadays, a lot of coaching articles on various types of different difficult conversations. So you can research the best approach that would work for you and your manager. Ahead of the meeting also, you want to set the agenda with your manager so he or she knows what to expect. That way the topic is set up, and when you go in there, it's not awkward to bring it up. Once you go in there, you want to be succinct. Practice ahead if you need to so that you're not like bringing up nervous chatter. And then bring with you any evidence, accomplishments, project details, whatever is relevant to build your case. Don't be afraid to clearly ask for what you want. Keep the conversation on track. The agenda is out there, but if your manager is not really willing to discuss it or has other things on her plate, just make sure that you bring the conversation back or schedule time in the future to revisit if it really isn't possible in that conversation. You don't have to feel like it's one and done, like I had this one shot and never again. Always thank your manager for taking time to think about what you're asking for. You can ask for feedback on your request, like does it make sense? In this case, if she says, no, I can't take you off this project, you can ask for feedback, like, why not? Why not? And is it something about the situation that I'm not fully seeing? And this helps you leave the room feeling a little bit more comfortable about whatever decision you guys come together, as opposed to just being upset and leaving and feeling like it wasn't fair. And then you can always wrap up by setting a clear follow-up time frame, whether it's to reschedule the original conversation or just to follow up on what the plan is going to be. Difficult conversations are honestly by definition difficult, right? But you can use some tools and tips like this to prepare yourself and make sure you get the outcome that you want. So now that we've looked a little at self-management, let's take a look at what happens when we start managing outwards across our different peer groups. I know that many of you face or have faced conflicts and issues with other peers in your organization. It's kind of inevitable when you're working with people that things come up. And I have to say that in today's world, the challenges are getting more and more complex because there's not only is there differences in styles and personalities, but there's like large departments, you have to navigate politics between department managers. There's a lot of work from home, bosses are remote or you might be remote. People are geographically separate. They could be in different floors, buildings, or just totally different countries. So there's a lot of things to navigate. And when you're trying to manage communication across all of these kind of different situations, it can get tricky and it can feel like you're isolated as well. So it becomes important to, at a first stage, understand your workplace, whether it's understanding, analyzing your work dynamics, all the different personalities, like the point people, and what some of the power balances might be in those situations. And sometimes that exists even within your team. And to understand it, you want to build good working relationships, to expand your network, to learn from people. If you can have a mentor in the workplace or even like a sponsor in the workplace, just to understand a little bit more how you should be navigating. I feel like people always say that, oh, we're open and we're transparent, and then there's these unwritten rules that you find out along the way. Like you never say this to Jen, or you never talk to Joe during lunchtime. So there's a lot of little things like that that can end up blocking communication. But the more you talk and the longer you're there, it just you kind of get a better sense of how things work together. Which really brings me to this quote that I read, the JFK rule of communication. Sorry about that. This JFK rule of communication: ask not what information other departments can deliver to you or people can deliver to you, but what you can do in these situations. The more initiative you take and the more you're proactive, it usually helps the situation. So we'll look at another story just to kind of demonstrate this point. So you're in a financial firm. There's a rivalry between two firms, let's say team A and B, and that often leads to withholding information and lack of transparency. When people talk about working in silos, like this is part of the problem. So say last October, there was a change in a business process. A lead from team A, whose name is Lee, and team B decided to create their own workflows without meeting with each other. The team lead Lee and team A became aware of the issue, but didn't mention it. They really, you're focused on not wanting to give away credit, wanting to look good, like all of these different things that you're working around. Unfortunately, Team B then had a significant error, which led to a financial loss because of the same issue. I'll give you guys a moment to process that example before I pull up the next poll, Jeff. And in the poll this time, I want you guys to take a look at who was responsible. So was it Team A because they knew the information, Team B because they made the error, both Team A and B, or Lee, who was the lead in Team A, who first became aware and he didn't do anything about it?
This is a tough one, Leena. I'm not sure which one I want to pick.
Some of these are tough because
yeah, sorry, I cut you off there.
We're kind of looking at it from our own point of view.
Well, I think our guests are struggling with it too because answers are coming in fairly slowly.
And that's okay. We can give it a minute.
And of course, I'm sure nobody on the webinar today can identify with this situation. These things just don't happen in big organizations.
We work in a silo and people are withholding information.
All right, well, let's move forward. We've got a good percentage of people who have weighed in with their answers, and you should see those on your screen now.
Yeah, and again, good job, you guys. Everyone's right on point with your communication. Yeah, the answer is Team A and Team B. And although in the real world, there'll be a lot of finger pointing and a lot of discussions and postmortems, the truth is both teams are responsible because they've created the situation in the first place. And there are real life consequences when you ignore or allow communication breakdown to persist. It's kind of like a disease in the organization that needs to be addressed because otherwise things go wrong. Do I have to close out the poll or you do?
No, I got that.
Okay, perfect.
And I just want to take a second to remind, we've already got a question that's come in that's a really good one. I want to invite people, Leena's bringing up some interesting things. Please go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box so we'll be ready to go when we get there.
So, I mean, I love that a lot of you guys had 85% of you guys had the answer right. And this checklist is really just to kind of remind us, like, what could these guys have been doing differently? Whether it's the team lead, whether it's the whole team. I mean, the focus really is on the organization or the success of the division. And that has to ultimately be the choice that guides you. And the leads in both teams should have stepped in well ahead of time. And the focus goes back to the first slide, which is me versus we. When you work in a me world, it's really hard to be successful as an organization. You want to always have an open attitude towards sharing information, offering to help, encouraging a culture of transparency. As you grow in your communication, you would be more willing, as you grow in your communication, meaning as you develop further, you'll be willing to become the leader in a situation like that and to start collaboration, to ask questions, and create opportunities for discussions that will actually foster improvement. Instead of Team A and Team B worrying about each other, if you had a leader in the group to start the conversation between the two, there would be so much more opportunity for success. It also helps when you spend time to build relationships with your peers. So you can expand your network, you learn about other job roles, and ultimately it becomes more natural to help each other. You know more about what they do, and when something like this comes up, you know exactly how to address it. And finally, it's not always about bringing something up in a meeting or a divisional meeting that might not be the right avenue. So identify what other avenues for communication you may have available for you. It could be something smaller, like a one-on-one. It could be just escalating up to a manager, so the manager is aware. There's different choices that are available to you. And ultimately, like I was saying when we started, you have the choice to be proactive and hold yourself accountable without waiting for someone to tell you to do that. And these choices then become the stepping stone for your team and then for your personal leadership, which is why we call it leadership and communication. You want to take on that role as being a leader in communication. And it's a way to stand apart from your peers. At the end of the day, you're all in a group, and who stands apart is the person who takes that initiative. So it's really important to keep that with you as you move forward in your career. And now that you're a leader and you're now risen up the ranks, let's say that you're managing a team. And the next challenge is really managing the communication between you and your team. What's critical about this is that now you're not judged just on your own performance, but the performance of the whole team as well. So just like with the other directions of communication, managing down starts with you as the manager. Research has shown that associates attempt to prioritize work based on what they believe their manager's priorities are, which means that as a manager, you need to be really clear with your communication. You need to understand the signals that you're sending and pay attention again to cues and feedback that you receive from your team, verbal or non-verbal, from your direct reports. And it's very similar to self-management skills, but as a manager, you're now directly responsible for the outcome of a group. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water. And it's important to underline that when associates are working to the benefit of their organization, they do more for the group as opposed to just trying to make their manager happy. And so you as the boss get to align those two things, what's good for the organization and what matches your expectations as well. It's also true when people say that people don't leave their jobs, they often leave their bosses. I don't know if some of you guys feel that way as well. When you have a good manager, even if not everything is perfect, you're a little bit more willing to stay because you feel like you're valued and you're recognized. So really effective downward management ends up having benefits that include employee retention, that enhance productivity and just engagement in the workplace. These are all like good indicators. So for the current, and I don't know if everybody's a manager in the chat or hopefully you're going to be soon, but just some tips to build good best practices for managing down. So being explicit with expectations and direct with your requests. Whether you're dealing with somebody else's expectations or yours, describing what is or isn't working is really helpful. Instead of just passing out information, be explicit with the instructions. Someone junior to you or less experienced may need a little bit more knowledge than you have. So there might be, a space for a little bit of training as well to make sure that they can actually meet your expectations. You want to follow up to see if your message was understood. What that means is that you might say something, but somebody might hear something totally different, and you cannot control how it's received. All you can do is verify that your message is actually being heard in the way you want it to be, because same words mean something different. And you can do this by just asking the question, what do you think? I gave you this role, what do you think the role is? Or I gave you this project, what are you planning to do? And that brings up any discrepancies right away. I find being patient goes a long way. I know this one is hard, and with my team, when someone comes and asks me the same question week after week, it's hard not to be frustrated. But again, as a manager, it just helps with communication if you're patient and you don't express that impatience or annoyance. And I try to think about how I would want someone to treat me if I had a question, even if I had it more than once. And so just think about how you would want your manager to treat you, and that's really how you want to treat your team as well. It helps in general to manage your emotion and think a little bit before speaking. Sometimes we tend to react really fast to something, and giving yourself some time or space to think about a situation and just making sure that you have all the information before you react or before you make a decision. All of that goes like a long way in building trust with your team as well. Positive reassurances are always great, like saying thank you or telling someone they did a good job, not waiting for a review, an official review to say that, but just saying it in the moment goes a long way. There's some studies that have shown that employees find recognition almost as valuable as compensation. So it really is an important thing to think about. And it helps promote just a culture of positivity. And, we keep coming back to feedback because it's such a crucial part of communication. But, there's positive reassurance, but not everybody is doing something right every single time. So instead of ignoring it, you really want to give them feedback. So when things don't go well, don't shy away from giving them that feedback. Don't try to avoid the topic or hope that it'll get better on its own. They'll just do it right the next time. Just take a moment to have a quick conversation. And people need that also to grow and become better and understand what you need from them. So you guys ready for another example? We're going to talk about addressing problematic behavior. And I used an easy example. There's a lot of different types of problematic behavior, but I felt like missing an important deadline is something that happens fairly often in the workplace, and probably one that we could all relate to. So we have this situation where Naveen is the manager and he's fairly easygoing, and he's not often upset with his assistant Jim, even though Jim is frequently late with meeting deadlines, works on projects for Naveen, but is not right on time with his deliverables, but Naveen's never had a conversation with him about it. Then one day, Jim misses an actually important deadline. Naveen loses his cool and puts him on probation. I mean, it seems like a little harsh. Some examples of poor performance is really inexcusable. And there's sometimes you do something wrong and I've seen people even get fired over it. But the question is it fair in this case? Probation is a strong step, and there might have been a different method for intervention. As a manager, this is a decision you kind of need to make. What is the situation, and what is a fair and reasonable response that's not out of emotion, but that's really based on the information that you have? So what could the manager have done? What could Naveen have done to mitigate the situation? There are some different ways that he could have handled it. I would say, going back, taking a look at self-management as a manager. As a manager, you need to take a look at the responsibility you might have in the situation you're creating. I'm not saying that Jim did anything right. He clearly missed an important deadline. But the starting point is, how did this situation come to be? You want to take some time to find out why Jim had not been able to work on it. Were there other conflicts at play? Were there other things that happened? Is that why he missed it? Instead of being reactive, he could have found out that information and given Jim a chance to explain himself, and then ultimately decided what the appropriate action step is. Before this situation, well before, Naveen should have set clear performance markers and avoided giving mixed messages and given Jim some guidelines for what to expect. Providing feedback early on in this case might have eliminated the situation altogether. And that's what's important to remember. Just like the last example, there's real world consequences when you have breakdown in communication. So whether it's you personally, whether it's with your teams, whether it's as a manager with direct reports, you really want to take initiative to be a leader in any form of communication. And as a manager, you really want to think ahead and put a corrective plan in place so that your associate knows what to expect from you. And now we're actually going to also see the flip side of this when you're the associate and you have to manage up to your boss and manager. And this is an important part, and it's also the last section for today, so we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at all the different rules of engagement and tips here. Business leaders have been interviewed to see, like, during layoffs and promotions, what is it that people really look for in their key employees? And they look for motivation, ambition, and reliability. And the question for you is, how do you create that perception? And you can do it in a few ways. You have a strong performance history, you've always worked really hard, you pick up extra projects, you've shown leadership, and all of that comes together when you learn how to communicate up. Because if someone doesn't know what you've been doing or how well you've been doing it, it doesn't really matter how good you are. So it goes back to, like, taking the initiative to make sure that your managers know where you're at. Which brings us also to our next poll. And hopefully this is an easy one for everybody. Which option is the closest to how you feel? You love your manager, you hate your manager hates you, which can happen. You don't care, it just depends on the day, or you're just your own boss. I'll give it a second to see if people start to pick options.
We're rolling in here, Leena. Let's give it another couple seconds.
Where are you at with this one, Jeff?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Given that you're on a recorded line.
No, well, you asked the question. There's a really unique dynamic with my manager. I've learned a ton from her. We've had our differences of opinion along the way. I think that her role is to coach me to be better, and sometimes I accept that, and sometimes I bristle against it. So we've been working together for 6 years, and I can say that's been successful, I think. but it isn't without its challenges. How's that?
And I think that's a very fair, it's a very fair relationship between a manager and associate. I mean, they're not there full time to coach you, but I think a good manager is able to balance like giving people responsibility as well as helping them along the way as needed.
We've stalled a little bit on the answers coming in. I think people are even more concerned about sharing something online, but so we'll go ahead and share those results. Good news here, I think.
It's great to see a lot of people love their manager. There's a few hates. There's much less my manager hates me, which as a coach, when I have clients, I feel like I hear that a lot, which is why I added it. A lot of people struggle with the response they get from their manager. And I'm my own boss. That's great. I think the 2 and 3 are really the demoralizing, tough ones. And I have to say, like, if you go back to my original story, when I walked out of that office, when Peter wasn't engaging with me, I was like, wow, does this guy hate me? And it didn't feel good. And it was definitely a challenge to kind of come back from that. Hang on a second. So what happens when you're having trouble getting through to your boss? Kim Strickland, who's a VP at Walmart, had a little quote out there: the better you understand your leaders, the easier life is and the more successful you will be. And I think that's really true, but where we get stuck is like, how do we understand our leaders? Not everyone is very forthcoming, not everyone is always available. So here are some questions to help you answer so you can kind of get to the bottom of it. And these are things that you can think about to try to get to know your manager a little bit better. Do you understand your manager's priorities and pressures? Like, what is he or she facing on a daily basis? Are you clear on what your manager expects from you? Are you meeting it? Have you asked the question? What is the communication structure you guys have in place? Is it regular meetings? Is it one-on-ones? Do you not speak unless something comes up? Like, is it working for both of you? And finally, how are you giving information and updates to your manager? And this can be critical to get your manager to really value your point of view. We tend to provide information based on how we would like to receive it and not the other way around. For example, I'm a number and facts person. And if someone comes in and tells me about all of their instincts about a situation, I'm less likely to be impressed. I may even think they just didn't do the work and they're coming in with, fluff. But for that person, it might be a very valid instinctive response that they've spent a lot of time thinking about. But you just want to understand, if you're reporting up to your manager, what is it that they care about? If you're a big picture person, you're an ideas person, and your associate comes in with a ton of details behind a decision, when all you want to hear about is the conclusion and the final impact, you can also get frustrated. You're really not interested in every single thought that they had coming to that point. So it just goes, these are all different examples, and the point is really that it's important to understand who your manager is and how in these areas is the best way to approach them is. But we can go a little bit deeper. So we have some concrete ground rules to engage. I call these the rules of engagement. So rule number 1, figure out, and this is a little bit what we were just saying, figure out and adapt to your boss's communication style. And you can do this either with your interactions with them or just by watching them interact with others. Take a note of what works, what isn't, so you can just be a little bit more in sync. Again, we're not talking about changing your personality. It's really just being aware and syncing up with what the other person needs. Rule number 2, having an agreement with your boss around how and when to update your boss on your work, as well as other regular meeting times. And you want to make sure that these updates and meetings count. You're going to be prepared for them. You don't want to wait on your boss to make the meetings happen. You want to take ownership to make meetings happen consistently. We have a lot of surveys in workplaces, like employee engagement surveys, that are called different things. And a question that associates often tend to answer is, my manager does not have time for me, does not attend my one-on-ones. And managers are always frustrated when they hear that, because yes, we're busy, but it doesn't mean that we don't have time. If we miss a meeting, reschedule it. Take some ownership to make that happen if it's important, instead of waiting for 6 months and then complaining on a survey. It just goes back to, like, how can you make a situation better instead of waiting for someone else to make it better for you? So rule number 3, escalating problems to the boss too quickly, which is along the same point. If you're taking things to your boss without having tried to solve for them yourself, or you're bringing problems without even having like a single potential solution, it can be frustrating for your manager who's also handling probably many other issues and trying to work on different projects with different people as well. You just want to figure out how to be a value add and not just suck up time talking through issues when you could have done a little bit more work yourself. Rule number 4, which is a little bit different, don't blindside your boss. This may depend on the personality, but for some people, withholding relevant information about an ongoing issue or bringing up a topic at a meeting that had not been previously discussed can make the boss feel like they were blindsided. So you just want to keep that in mind. And if you do disagree with your boss, which is totally fine also, you want to do it respectfully if it has to be in public, but most likely it's better to do that in private. Have a one-on-one, explain your point of view, and just have a discussion about how you disagree with it. It's acceptable to have a different opinion. You just don't want to embarrass your boss by, getting into like a shouting match in front of a lot of people. Rule number 5, and this is fairly obvious, don't talk badly about your boss behind their back. And especially in today's world, I feel like we don't always know who knows each other and how people are connected, and everything comes around. And honestly, at the end of the day, this is the person who's making decisions about your future. So it literally pays to be careful and respectful. Rule number 6, so if you have a skill set or interest that's not being utilized, there's something that you really think you're good at, and those projects are always going to somebody else, take some time to point it out to your boss. And you may have to do that more than once. So I know in some situations, people will say, well, I already told him once that I'm really good at PowerPoint. So if he doesn't give me the deck a month later, then it must be that he doesn't care. Or it could be that it's just not on top of his mind. So don't be afraid to bring it up again. He may or may not be aware of all your unique strengths. He may not remember all of your unique strengths. So it helps to be proactive, to work out a plan for your personal or career development. Try to have schedule one-on-one so you can keep track of growth or progress, especially during review time. Your manager may not remember all of the things that you've worked on, so be sure to just keep track of your own progress as well. So this helps just to build and develop your skills and also to keep track of them at the end of the day. And number 7, ask yourself whether tensions are a problem of clashing styles versus a fundamental conflict. Fundamental conflict are sometimes situations which are really hard to navigate. You may need to move out of the department at that point, or you may just want to look for another boss. I'm not saying quitting is the answer, but there are times when that ends up being the best answer. But for a lot of people, that's not really an option. It's not an option people want to take. So the focus here is, how can you work with clashing styles? How can you find a way to coexist within that context? And because that's such an important one, I wanted to focus a little bit more on it on the next slide. And the fact is that not all bosses are the same. There's going to be all different personalities, and there's going to be all different styles. And so as much as you want to adapt, if you're not fully able to, here are some things that you can do to put in place instead. So for example, you have a boss that's not as smart as you. So that can be frustrating. Like, why is this person promoted, especially if they were promoted over you and you find that that was not fair. As long as you're staying in that role, how can you make the best of it? There's obviously some things that your boss did to get to the role place that he is. So I would say focus on what you can learn from your manager, even if it's not necessarily knowledge, but there might be other personality or leadership skills that you can learn. So identify those, separate him from your work, and then focus on working hard. And you see if you can find somebody else to support you for training. While you should always support your boss and team, you don't need to take ownership for their mistakes. So if he's not really making the right choices, you might want to find a way to distance yourself from that, but support in terms of you keep doing good work. So in today's digital world, it's also more and more common to have a primarily electronic relationship with your boss, where it's digital or remote, you're working from home, or sometimes you have a boss who's physically present, but it's just very hands-off or super busy with other projects, is pretty much unavailable, which ends up sometimes feeling like the same way, like you don't ever see your boss. in these cases, you want to create rules of communication that can work for both of you. You want to use the technology you have, like video, making sure that you calendar regular updates, you set up check-in times. You want to, if it's possible, plan a trip so you can meet your boss in person, get to know your virtual contacts, and then engage as needed to get feedback. So if you want feedback specifically and there's no specific time coming up, see if you can schedule something, or if there's another manager or boss that you can work with in the meantime. There's always opportunities to be a little bit creative, is what I've found. Not every situation is exactly how we want it to be, but we can sometimes have ways of making it work out the way we want it to. So brand new boss is a little bit different. There's not a negative connotation, but there's somebody new and you may or may not be thrilled about that. So that's the kind of relationship you want to ease into the relationship, observe what is required of you as you both go through the transition period. You want to be transparent and collaborative with the practices that you've had in place. And the sooner your boss is up to speed, the better it is for everybody. Remember, this is out of your control. So if you can accept the changes as they happen and try to make it easier for everybody, then it just works out better. If it's a brand new boss and you've already decided that you hate your boss no matter what, then that just makes the entire experience very difficult. And then, of course, we have my favorite, the conflicting messages boss. You have an undecisive boss or a boss that keeps changing their mind and sends out conflicting messages. And it can be frustrating because you think you're supposed to be working in this direction. And then a couple of days later, you find out that the whole plan has changed. And you're like, wait, did I just waste all my time? Like, what next? So while that can be frustrating, again, try to build a strategy and work within it. You can acknowledge the conflict. You can raise it to your manager as much as possible. You can try to provide information to help with the decision-making early on. You can discuss priorities. You can try and summarize frequently, like all of the takeaways, so that when something does change, you're not both left stranded. I would say that overall, having a strategy and a positive attitude in almost any of these situations really makes them a little bit easier to handle. And the goal is ultimately to figure out which strategy is going to work best for you and your boss. And you want to do that with agreement and with discussion with your manager as much as possible. And finally, one last point before we wrap up. Beyond your immediate managers, there's still always more room for managing up. And what I mean by that is that there's your boss, but there's also your boss's boss. And there's also other senior managers and other teams. There's senior mentors that you can build a relationship. And it might take a little bit more effort because this is not someone you're engaging with on a work basis, but it's important to also build those relationships, especially the larger the organization is, the harder it is to really be visible. So don't hesitate. When you meet a senior manager, try to engage in dialogue, leave a positive impression behind. You can do small talk, think of some stories you can share, and it just helps to build a connection. If there are company outings, make sure you attend them. You can ask thoughtful questions. You can seek out opportunities for visibility by making it a point to present if there's like an opportunity to do that. Any kind of opportunity for visibility really is helpful. And just in general, just remember when you're thinking about communicating, you want to remember your ABCs. You want to be adaptable. You want to watch your behavior. You want to speak powerfully, and you want to try and create a connection. And all of these things come together to grow you as an inner leader. And with that, we've come to an end to all of the material for today. I know we covered a lot, and I hope you guys found it helpful and useful. Thank you for participating in the polls. And just before we open it up to questions, Jeff, I wanted to tell you guys about a little gift I have for all of you taking the time today. This is a special thank you, and it includes a complimentary consult, a practical guide for managing up. I'm going to include some responses in that, and then 10 tips for presenting to senior management, which as we move up, we often have to do. And there's some ways to make sure that we do that really well. So to access the gift, all you have to do is email me with this code by April 1st, and that's it. You'll shoot me an email, and I'll take it from there, and I'll help you set up the complimentary consult. So be sure to write down my email. I'll give you guys a quick second now to write it down. So you can email me right now also. That works too.
Well, Leena, this is a really generous gift that you're offering everybody. Thank you. And I can tell already because of the number of questions we have that we'll try to get to all of them, but I think we've got some folks who might benefit from that complimentary consultation where they can ask
I
you.
feel like it's always hard to cover every situation or every kind of issue or really address it, but one-on-one makes it a little bit more personalized.
Well, we've got a few minutes here, but I will ask you to we'll try to do this speed round style where you can try to keep your answers short so we can get to all of them. Great question from Sabrina. Do you have any tips regarding behavior for when speaking via phone or having meetings remotely instead of meeting face-to-face? You talked about things like body language and breathing and things like that. How about for those remote meetings and online meetings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And Sabrina, you should definitely email me so I can send you over some tips. But yeah, you want to be really careful about the noise that's around. You want to be careful if you're breathing on the phone. You want to try and articulate as much as possible so people can't see your expression, but you can put a lot of expression into what you're saying and how you're saying it. So you want to be mindful that you get your message across effectively, just using the skill, the space that you have available to you. What's hard, I think, with a lot of remote conversations is waiting in turn to speak. So somebody might ask a question and 2 or 3 people start speaking at the same time. So some of that protocol around, like, should I wait or should I speak? And I think some of it works itself out, but you just want to be careful about not interrupting or not. I've heard someone say that about a colleague, like, that's the guy who always interrupts on the phone. So you just want to be mindful of those things.
Any tips for how to tactfully bring up to your boss that your communication styles are different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like a lot of the things that we just discussed, you could start with like the difficult conversation checklist. I don't know if you want to send an agenda topic saying, I can't talk to you, but you can set an agenda topic that sounds like a little bit about what you want to discuss. You can say, meeting time or update schedule or something. So just so your manager knows that this is what you want to bring up. And then have some ideas when you go into that meeting, like what would work for you? What are you proposing? And keep it unemotional and just see how he or she responds.
Leena, I work for a small startup and everyone is male except for me. For whatever reason, I feel like I am held to a higher standard regarding communications. So as examples, nobody else ever shares info, important dates or meetings, but I do. What are some sly ways to get the team to make an investment in communicating openly and in a timely fashion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's really hard to change a culture. I've worked in a smaller organization and people kind of take their cues from the leader. I feel like maybe the best one approach might be to reach out to somebody who's senior in that organization and is I know it's a startup, so it's pretty flat, but somebody who's kind of setting the trend for how things are being managed in terms of communicating dates and calendars and things like that, and see if there can be a overall importance placed on that kind of communication. Some other ways is just really to engage with people one-on-one and tell them that this is important and try to see if that impacts at all.
Next question. As a lead, how do we get someone on the team to become more engaged and more productive? You had a slide where you shared 8 tips for managing down. Are there other things that you might add on top of that in terms of trying to get your team more on board?
I think those tips kind of cover a lot of what I would say. I guess I would need to hear a little bit more about why this person is not being engaged. If there's something else, sometimes there's a backstory or a different motivation that could be impacted, where they feel like I'm a team lead, but I'm not getting XYZ benefits that I think I should be getting in this role, and so people tend to push or pull away, or if they feel like they're not being heard in the same way. So I would say like the first place to start is really having a conversation with that team lead and get a sense of what that like block is coming from.
Sorry, go ahead, Leena.
Just to add to that, and then you might also consider investing in your lead if they're valuable and having them go through some kind of communication training too. have them, set them up for some coaching or training. I don't know if something's available at the company or outside. And that sometimes gives people just a reset of how they're showing up.
Kudos to everybody for great questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them. We've run up against the hour. So I, again, invite you to take Leena up on her offer of a private consult. You can email her. But let's do this last question that I think kind of wrap things up nicely. Do you have any advice or criteria on deciding when to begin looking for a new job if the one you're in just isn't working? So after trying all of these things, having those conversations about styles and really trying to practice communication, Leena, when is it time to cut bait?
I know. It's a tough choice, and I think it's like a personal choice. Just like breaking in a relationship. When have you really met your threshold? I think I have a whole blog or a video on this, so I'm going to be happy to send that over to you if you shoot me an email with that question. Or you can find it on my website as well. But it really is a tough decision. When do you actually leave? I say that if you're not happy at all and nothing is changing, you might as well start looking, because it never hurts to start looking. And if you find something better, go for it. It never hurts, right? Like, it never hurts to start the process. And nowadays, I think job search takes a few months sometimes, if not longer. So why not start the process? Have your resume ready.
Well, my apologies to those of you whose questions we won't get answered. But Leena, you covered so much today, and I think you covered things that anybody in any kind of working situation can take heed to. So I can't thank you enough for your time and for sharing this with our alumni.
No, thank you. It was an honor to be here, and I'm really happy to have had this experience, and I hope it was useful for everybody. And you did an awesome job with the polls and moderating.
You're very welcome. I'm a seasoned pro. We've got some folks asking about that code. I'm guessing at the end of the day, if people want to follow up with you, just the best thing is to send there you go. Okay. Yeah. But obviously just email Leena. I want to thank everybody for participating today. I want to thank those of you who've donated to BU in the past. And I want to let everybody know on Wednesday, April 3rd is going to be our annual BU Giving Day. I hope you'll all think about joining me in supporting a BU cause that you care about. You can get more information or make your donation at bu.edu/givingday. For those of you who might be interested in doing a professional development webinar just like Leena, please contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or at jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I hope you have a great evening or a great day wherever you might be. And thanks again, Leena.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Communicate well.
Good advice. Thanks.